I think we should probably make a start just now, if everyone's happy with that. Thank you so much for joining today. My name's Dr. Avril Johnstone. I'm a research assistant at the MRC CSO Social and Public Health Sciences Unit at the University of Glasgow. And my research largely focuses on children's active and outdoor play and how that impacts their health and well-being. Now, we have approximately 120 people registered. That's from Scotland and from beyond Scotland as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Now, today's event is hosted by the MRC CSO Social and Public Health Sciences Unit, and it brings together 4 experts on World Children's Day to explore how Scotland is promoting outdoor learning and play to improve children's health and well-being. Now, that's really important because the Scottish Government has made substantial investment to providing more outdoor learning and play opportunities. So one example is through the doubling of free childcare, which is seeing more outdoor learning and play opportunities for children in the early years. But as many of you know, there's also some fantastic work happening across the children in Scotland in terms of outdoor learning and play. Now, World Children's Day is celebrated every year on the 20th of November to promote and raise awareness of children's welfare. It was on the 20th of November 1989 when the UN General Assembly adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which sets out the specific rights that all children have to fulfil their potential. Now, of course, one that's close to many of our hearts is Article 31, the child's right to play. Now, with Scotland becoming the first country in the UK to directly incorporate the rights of the child into domestic law, we thought today would be a fantastic opportunity to showcase how Scotland is promoting outdoor learning and play for children. Now, before I pass on to Paul Mccrory, who will be hosting today's event, I just wanted to run through a few housekeeping rules. So first of all, it's to say that we are recording today's event. However, participants can't be seen, so feel free to grab your lunch and to listen to today's event. Now, we are looking for your engagement, and you can engage through a couple of ways. So first of all, you can use the Q&A function, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom call, bang in the middle probably. So if you select that button, you can then type in questions during the entirety of the event. Now, you should also be able to see the other questions that people are posing. So if you see that someone has asked a really good question, you can give it a thumbs up, and that will increase the priority of that question. Secondly, you can use the chat function, which is located on the right-hand side, I believe. I'd ask you to select all attendees and panelists in the drop-down menu before you add something to the chat. Now, please use the chat function for anything else, so any observation, to post any resources, or anything that you feel might be relevant for us. And finally, please tweet out during today's event. If I can move my slides. So we are using the hashtag World Children's Day and Outdoor Play, there we go, which is up on the screen now. And you can reach us at the SPHSU. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. I will now pass on to Paul Mccrory, who is going to be hosting today's event.
Thanks, Avril. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today. Thanks to all our panelists. My name is Dr. Paul Mccrory. I'm also a member of the team here at SPHSU, which is less of a mouthful than what Avril had to say. Most of my research actually is in children's outdoor physical activity, but alongside Dr. Anne Martin, who's one of our expert panelists today, we kind of co-lead a programme of work with regards to nature-based ELC, of which I'm going to let Anne talk more about. I was part of the organising committee for last year's conference that we did, actually, Nature and Children's Health Conference, which is such a wonderful experience for us all, and I hope some of you actually attended that. Unfortunately, we can't obviously do that this year, so it's a great opportunity for us still to get together. And I think the purpose of today for me is really a recognition of the importance of outdoor play and learning, and not only just the importance of that, but how it sits in a wider context. We of course have got expert speakers across different areas and different sectors, and I think if we've got to understand about this as an area, we have to ensure we take on board all of the different avenues and angles through which we learn and create robust evidence to inform decision making. Now, the kind of main perspective and purpose, I think, also is this idea of opportunity. That, and I'll try and reinforce this as we go through as well, that today and all days like this gives us an opportunity to work together more collaboratively, more closely in everything that we do. And this type of event allows us to take that to another level, to inform future research, to inform policy making decisions, to inform the design process and practice. All those relationships are interdependent. They're not mutually exclusive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each of our speakers one by one. We're going to have 5 minutes where they're going to have an opportunity just to present some of their research or area of expertise. And that's going to last about 20 minutes. We'll come back and then I'll offer one major question that's going to hopefully set the tone of the day. And then it's all up to you guys who are there attending. We want you to engage as well as you possibly can. Post your questions and we'll take this forward. Now, it is supposed to be quite an informal discussion, so let's try and make sure we just keep it a nice kind of level tone and enjoy a Friday afternoon and see where we go. So first off, I'm going to pass over to Henry, as National Care Standards Strategic Lead from Care Inspectorate, to present just for 5 minutes on his kind of area. Thanks, Henry.
Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, I recognise a few folk attending, so nice to connect with you all. Yeah, interesting, the day itself and Scotland's positioning as, you know, are we and how far in the journey to become, you know, the best place in the world to grow up, are we? Probably fair to say that we've got a long way to go, but outdoor play is certainly one area where we've made significant progress. And speaking, you know, from the Care Inspectorate, the national regulator and scrutiny body, just really want to acknowledge the shift that has been made in terms of government and government agencies with regard to outdoor play, having been on quite a journey from seeing outdoor play as being full of risks. We're now in a position where we're absolutely embracing the benefits of outdoor play for children and helping services overcome and manage, you know, the risks that are inherent in being outside. But isn't it interesting with COVID, how that has shifted the approach to outdoor play and recognize that actually it's a very safe place for children to be compared to much indoor environments. And we have absolutely seen a complete sea change in terms of children's experiences of outdoor play when they're accessing early learning and childcare. There's a lot more of it generally. There's specialist forest kindergartens, and the Care Inspectorate is now supporting, along with agencies like Inspiring Scotland, that growth in specialist forest kindergartens. But maybe more importantly than that, outdoor play is being seen as an absolutely essential part of the expansion of early learning and childcare and all that government funding that is going in to support the expansion. And so we've been delighted to, you know, produce a lot of practice guidance with colleagues to support that expansion. So just on the screen there, you've got My World Outdoors, we've got Space to Grow and Out to Play. And they're very practical guides, hopefully helping early learning and childcare services, the full range of services, not just nurseries, but also childminders, playgroups, out of school care and other types of services, build in outdoor play as an integrated part of their overall offer to children and families. I think that'll be enough from me, Paul.
Thanks, Henry. A great start to the day and a great position for, I think, the rest of our speakers as well. So I'm not going to say much more. Straight on to Felicity, please, and we can get a really great perspective now from a landscape architect. Sorry, Felicity, yeah, you're on. Yeah.
That's okay, sorry. I'll start again. Thank you for having me. I come at this as a designer, but also as a person that grew up with a very country childhood. I grew up building dens and falling in rivers and breaking my arm and climbing on horses and all sorts of things. But I've worked all the way through my adult life in Glasgow, and I started off as a graduate working for Glasgow City Council as a schoolscape officer, going into schools and with budgets of £5,000 in Glasgow, trying to find ways to improve school playgrounds. So I'm very, very aware of some of the challenges that we face with our built environment, particularly in the cities in Scotland. I was involved in 2010 in building the Merrily School Urban Jungle in the south side of Glasgow, which was the first sort of built and designed natural playground in Scotland. And since then, and on the back of that, I've been much more involved in doing a lot of educational work, and I've been working with East Ayrshire Council in particular for the last 2 or 3 years on early years expansion. I really believe in children's ability to play and bring imagination into almost any space, and talking and working with children and teachers, you realise that things that can seem very irrelevant almost can have great meaning. And there's a theory about sacred space and understanding that spaces can have meanings to people that are not immediately obvious. So as a designer, I try to get back to my childhood and get back to that sort of place of wonder. And I'm a very fierce advocate of good design. I don't think we should be afraid to say that things should be beautiful and inspiring. And I think that kids need and deserve beautiful and well-designed spaces. So I'm not somebody that advocates building things out of pallets and car tires. I think we should be aiming much higher than that. And one of the main reasons is because we also have to entice adults outside. So when we're designing in an educational environment for children, we are also designing for the staff and the people who look after them. And a lot of them, as we were talking about before we began, will be quite averse to going out in the rain. And so we have to really work hard in order to design environments that suit adults and children and enable children to get back to that place of wonder. So that's what I'm about.
Thank you so much, Felicity. There's a lot in there as well that hopefully we can get into with some of the questions as we go forward, because it's such a key role, I think, in our kind of field here, is that how do we design, or how do we use both natural and built environment to ensure that the affordances are available to everyone who uses it. So thank you so much for that. I'm now going to pass on to Natalie, who hopefully give us a bit of a perspective from kind of the more practice kind of teaching, outdoor learning development officer perspective she has.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So who am I? Yeah, I'm Natalie White. I'm a principal teacher and outdoor learning development officer for Learning Outdoors Support Team, which is based in East Ayrshire Council. We're part of the education team, Central Education Department. And if you're a Twitter user, I think I would thoroughly recommend getting on the Twitter, because there's some fantastic work that gets exemplified across Twitter as a professional framework, learning opportunity. So I'm on as Natalie White or EAC Lost, and we put all of our stuff out on that web. I'm also a passionate advocate for learning outdoors and using the real world as a context and providing the next generation with the opportunity for engaging and meaningful learning experiences. So what do I do? My role is, I'm really privileged. I get to work across all of the 3 to 18 sectors, special, primary, early and secondary. And I'm basically essentially working as a curriculum outdoors attainment challenge teacher, which is building capacity with teachers to teach the curriculum outdoors using the playgrounds, local green spaces and the wider communities, and linking that all into their understanding of the world around them. It's a global offer for all of the education establishments as well. I also have to cover and provide offer and support for them. So this varies across every every school. And for some, we were speaking earlier on about shelters. It's just about giving them shelters or giving them learning materials, welly boots, actual practical things that they can use outside, how to build a polytunnel, where to plant trees, all of that's all part of it. We also have a huge bank of teaching resources that we've now put since COVID on our web pages. So that's shared across anybody that wants that. Webinars, CPD, links, offers, all that kind of stuff is all now on a web page. We've also got networks and professional learning communities that we're involved in, that kind of we share practice, and we encourage other teachers to share their practice, and from that we have the opportunity to, I suppose, to show everyone the extremities and the great diversity that is outdoor learning across 3 to 18, across schools, across different contexts, and that ranges from forest schools, play in early years settings, or right the way up to the more adventurous activities, residential experiences. All of that is an opportunity for children to learn, and all those contexts are really valid. And it benefits all of the children and young people. So the work's really important because I'm supporting the children to thrive and flourish and prosper, and we're extending that learning environment. When children are outside, they're constantly more active. Exemplifying good practice. I'm aware that clicking the links isn't quite matching into my speaking, apologies. Why do we do it? It's because the health benefits, that we've got so much research now, physical and mental health, how it's massively improved just by being outside. And I mean, I just give the example quite simply of when we're in a classroom, we're sedentary, we're sat at desks, the teacher sat at a desk, and there's very little movement. Even just by standing up and going outside, we've immediately engaged physically all parts of our being, including, more importantly, as I've just realized, our eyesight. And we're seeing, children with eyesight, and that's because our muscles are working at different, using the different light settings that come in and things like that. Using those muscles increases the positive effect on our eye muscles. So we've also got constant changes, which go outside, and this is offering us this kind of authentic experiences, really positive and diverse, and that can be from just being in the playground to being in the community, speaking with people, being in green space environments, being in beach environments. All of these learning experiences, these diverse contexts that we're learning, have added value to them. We've also got the personal and social skills, that the number of teachers that mention that children behave differently when they're outside, the way that we interact with our peers and our adults is very different from a classroom environment, and we find that even with adults, parental engagement in some of our more deprived communities is dramatically less, and that's because a lot of parents have got a lot of issues themselves about crossing back into that school environment, and so we find actually learning in a neutral green space or a local park, that sort of experience has been removed, that barrier essentially. So using the outdoor environment is really positive in that terms. And then we've got that we have essentially, I suppose, that it's that we can teach the 4 capacities so beautifully, that the teachers have a way of developing the successful learners, confident individuals, responsible citizens, and effective contributors through real life applications in the context of the outdoor space. And finally, there's connections, which is vitally important, that we make for young people, these connections to people, place, and planet. And time and time again, we're finding that when children are learning in the outdoor environment, this is their experiences, that it's actually much more, you're much more able to create these connections with people, place, and planet when you're outside. So hopefully that's kind of summed up a bit of the why I do what I do.
It certainly has, Natalie, it certainly has. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I think what your slide there exemplifies is this idea of kind of thinking through outdoor play and learning opportunities as a kind of system, and trying to think of all those different interacting components and maybe really influential to that. You touched on relational aspects, social components, parents, peers. Again, these are lots of great questions that hopefully will come in. And actually now, it's probably a nice kind of link to my colleague, Dr. Anne Martin, who I'm going to present now, hopefully some of the work that we've been doing in our unit. Anne.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and welcome everyone. So yeah, as Paul said, I'm also based at the Social and Public Health Sciences Unit at the University of Glasgow. And my background is actually more from the health angle of things. So I'm a physiotherapist and nutritionist, and my wider research interest lies in promoting child healthy development, primarily through researching the role of physical activity, healthy eating, and sleep in the early years as part of an obesity prevention strategy. And I'm also interested in how physical activity and other health behaviors, such as being exposed to digital media, are linked with cognitive development and emotional well-being of children. So, and what I'm doing, so Paul mentioned already, we are co-leading a series of research projects that collectively aim to answer kind of one overarching research question, which is, what is the impact of nature-based early learning on childcare on health and well-being of children, their families, childcare staff, and the wider community? And we are answering this research question through a whole systems approach that brings together the benefits and also risks for children, families, childcare staff, and the early learning and childcare sector on local and national government. So this whole systems approach recognizes the importance of multiple levels of influence on child health and well-being. So including individual differences of the children, so their age, their gender, their socioeconomic background, social relationships Paul just mentioned, so parental attitudes or practitioners' attitudes or grandparents or siblings' attitudes to outdoor play and learning, and how this then influences modeling behavior of the adults and other family members around those children. Also importantly to mention institutional factors, so kind of organizational and structural management related issues for childcare centers, for example, community level factors. So is there a shared understanding, shared norms and values around outdoor play and learning? And what is the physical environment like? So what is the availability and access to outdoor space, and in particular, availability and access to nature? And a number of sub-questions aligning to each level of the whole system help us to put together the bigger puzzle to answer the big overarching question. And for example, on child level, we've carried out a systematic literature review, bringing together the existing global evidence on the links between nature-based early learning and childcare and child health and well-being outcomes. And this literature review was funded by the Scottish Government. It is now completed and will be available in the public domain very soon. So on parent level, for example, we conducted interviews with parents of children who attend outdoor nurseries, so both full outdoor nurseries or satellite nurseries in Glasgow. So we might touch on the differences and delivery models in our discussions later on as well. So, and we also have currently an online survey ongoing where we want to explore parental perception of the risks and benefits of outdoor play and learning in the early years, so children aged 2 to 5. On practitioner level, we have a number of projects ongoing actually. So one is very similar to the online survey for parents. So we are also currently asking through an online survey practitioners to tell us their perceptions of the risks and benefits of outdoor play and learning. And that involves also childminders. And also, then we have another 2 projects that involve workshops with practitioners. So again, center-based practitioners, childminders, nursery managers. And with these workshops, they are actually taking place, unfortunately, online. We are looking into the challenges and facilitators of implementing outdoor play and learning. And also we develop collaboratively a framework for evaluating outdoor early learning and childcare. So why are we doing all that? So we believe that our whole systems approach provides a more powerful research that will allow us to explore whether outdoor play and learning is as good as or better than traditional childcare. And it will also inform on what, how, when and why any possible outcomes are improved. And this is important to inform ongoing decision making at both local and national level. But also it helps to advise on the national scale up and implementation of outdoor play and learning, and including supporting best practice. And we're also doing this to identify and ideally mitigate any potential risks and key challenges within the different levels of the whole system. And finally, we do want to contribute to filling some evidence gaps scientifically, on practice level, and on policy level. So that's all from me for now.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic overview, and thank you so much for that. That gives everyone hopefully a really nice flavour of certainly the work that we're doing in the unit and how we are really trying to structure that work to support and help decision making at all different levels. I think the key, as I said about today, is about how we move forward in this field, and certainly from a research perspective, we're trying to set our stall out to do just that and ensure the questions that we're asking at research level is going to drive the area forward to that place where we can scale up. So thank you everyone for those introductions and overviews of the work that you've been doing. I thought it would be quite a good idea to set the tone really nice and early with questions and ask probably a really tough question and just like get you all kind of shaking in your boots. So here we go. I'm going to go around one by one. So it is World Children's Day, and I think I speak on behalf of everyone watching. We all recognise Article 31 of the UNCRC and children's right to play. So the tough question is this: what's your fondest childhood memories of play? And has it influenced or impacted the work you do today? Henry, to yourself.
Yeah, that is a difficult question. I'm taken back to being with a small group of children. We were really young, maybe 3 years old or something like that. And there was a space in between. These are neighbours' kids, and there was a space in between the garage around the back that we could access that was completely private. I don't even know actually if a parent, they probably did, looking back on it. But nevertheless, from our point of view, as very young children, it felt really special to have this secret place that was ours as kids. And the adults didn't know about it. And that felt really special, and that we were genuinely kind of, it was ours. And I think I've taken that into some of the, developments I've currently been, involved in terms of ownership, and in terms of talking about emotions and whether or not people feel like outdoor play is being done unto them and is the latest direction, advice that they have to follow as practitioners, staff, parents, or whether or not they genuinely want to be doing this and feel it and own it themselves. So it's to try to kind of have an empowering approach to the expansion of outdoor play, rather than it being, right, here's the latest list of things you've got to do.
Yeah, that's fab, Henry. Thank you so much, because I think those ideas of empowerment, and actually certainly within our education system, the recognition that, teachers, practitioners get asked to do a hell of a lot, and we get asked to do one thing after other, and quite often that idea of autonomy and allowing ourselves to recognise importance is super important. And I think I'm asking these questions because I also recognise that our own memories, our own historical kind of behaviours can influence where we go in our futures, and also how that actually may impact those that are in the kind of area of outdoor play as well. So, Felicity, can I ask yourself, what are your fondest childhood play memories? Again, sorry, I think you're on mute.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, as I said before, I grew up in the countryside, and I remember when I was very small, and I think anyone who's my age would remember there were 2 winters in the late 1970s when it snowed really, really a lot. And one of those winters, the village where I grew up filled up with massive snowdrifts, and you could actually walk up the top of the hedges, up the roads. But we couldn't get out of the village. We were completely snowed in, and the milkman came down on a sledge from the village at the top of the hill. And my friend Matthew and I built a house in a snowdrift, and we spent a week doing it. And it had several rooms and windows and furniture, and it had a view of the river, which was frozen. And I think that, like Henry was saying, it was the thing of being away from adults and having autonomy, but it was also the making, so having complete control over my environment and making little spaces that were the same, that were the right size for me. I must have been about 7. And so the magic of the snow, but also just being able to make my own place.
Fab, Felicity, thanks so much. It's a great memory, it really is. Okay, so moving on, Natalie, yourself. Love to hear about your childhood memories.
Do you know, it's funny, oh my goodness, because one of my first memories that when you said that jumped into my head was me sitting out the back garden with all my dolls and my teddies being teacher. I didn't actually realise quite how ridiculous that was until I realised that I'm just reenacting it bigger now. Yeah, the Henry totally and utterly hit it nail on the head, being away from parents and adults and the freedom to roam. I was really fortunate. I grew up in a really small little village that had a play park, and that was pretty much it. But we had rivers and woods, and we did just roam free, and lots of great memories of building dens and skiddling in the puddles and the mud and the wee stream catching minnows, and a very, very vivid memory of catching frogs and building a tower and seeing how many frogs we could get into the tower before they filled up the tower. And I horrified that I actually did that, because these poor frogs were all piled on top of each other in this kind of makeshift kind of brick stone thing that we'd created. But again, some really lovely memories, and also a little island in one of our rivers that had that we used to have to jump across to get onto, and we used to pretend that the island was our free space that nobody else could get onto and defend it. And yeah, some lovely, really, but again, all outside. I can't think of very many memories inside, and I think that was just the affordability of being allowed to roam free from quite a young age. Yeah.
And the ability to kind of use that creativity and imagination that we have in heaps and bounds when we're younger as well. And we've got an opportunity to use that all the time. Yeah, and I can definitely see then how that is actually translated into where you are right now, without a doubt. Definitely. Thanks, Natalie. Anne, and to yourself.
Yeah, I can just echo, and what I say now is probably echoing everything that Henry, Felicity, and Natalie said. However, I grew up in the east of Berlin, so very city. I'm a city girl, but even then, so roaming around was possible at the time. I would argue it's not possible anymore. But so what I did, so in the east of Germany, of Berlin, I don't know how many of our listeners know, but we have loads of high rises and these kind of segmented type of communities, but all the communities are connected. So I was roaming around, and really far, actually, if I think back now, how far I roamed, like how many blocks and streets away from home. And so what I did to meet my friends, because my school was far away, and to meet them, so I had to go far away. So we usually played on the back courts of our houses. So all components of houses had a playground, all of them, and all had green space around as well. So, and when we roamed around, it was mainly going to these different back courts and playing on playgrounds, and we made up games on the climbing frames, and it was always quite physically active, I have to say, which obviously influences my work now as well, and seeing the importance of physical activity and being outdoors and being creative and making up things for the development of the child's brain and physical development. But yeah, I can also emphasize the importance of the empowerment of being allowed to roam free, and very often I left the house early and returned late, even though it was in an very urban environment. So that was my memory.
Thanks, Anne. It's fantastic, because I think it's super important for us to recognise and realise that there's geographical variation in where all our children stay. So there is a realisation that we have children who grow up in extremely rural areas of the country, who may have greater access to natural space, green space. And we have those children who grow up in highly urbanised areas where that access to naturalised spaces may be different. Not to say they're worse, but they may be different. I certainly grew up in a semi-rural kind of small town area, but I was very, very lucky to have a lot of farmyard behind me. And I did a presentation last week at the Spark conference, and I kind of showed a map of my home in terms of, you know, the spatial extent of where I was allowed to go, the idea of independent mobility, where I went, where I was allowed to roam free with, and actually how important the social environment was. I had lots of friends in my kind of home neighbourhood, which meant I had maybe 5 or 6 friends that we all went off. And I was of that same generation where the parents of those children would be on the streets at 5, 6 o'clock every single day, shouting and hollering across all of the field to try and find out where the children were, because none of them knew where they were. We didn't have mobile phones, so it's a case of let's just shout as loud as we can and see if we can get them in for dinner. They'll get in for dinner and they can go back out. And things have changed. And those opportunities may or may not exist, or they may exist in a slightly different way. So that's one of my fondest memories, actually, some of that, listening to our parents shouting and screaming for us to get in, and us purposely ignoring them and just staying outside. So we are starting to get some really great questions coming through. I've got some questions myself, but what we'll do is we'll actually maybe try and touch on some of these right now. So thanks so much for giving us those memories. We're starting to see populated as well within the chat function, some others, which is great to see. I'm going to ask a question here, I think, Anne, to you. It's from Alex McConnell. Anne, in the context of your research at the unit, when asking practitioners their view, have you noticed any resistance from practitioners in terms of the increase of outdoor play provision? Also, do you feel this may have implications or changes of view on play pedagogy? And this is a question from a stressed master's student trying to chip away at his topic. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have to say that the research is still ongoing, so we haven't fully finalized it, but from the practitioners that we asked so far, particularly about any issues around the implementation, there is very little resistance, I have to say, for those that were willing to answer. So you always, of course, in research, you have a bias to who is willing to participate and to give responses. But what came out quite strongly, though, is that not all practitioners feel that that all have the skill set to do it. So they might be asked to do it, but they might not have the skill set to deliver appropriate outdoor play and learning. And I know that there's quite a lot of work going on in training practitioners to be confident and have the self-efficacy to deliver outdoor play and learning. So yeah, that's what we found, but I can probably, Natalie or Henry might have some thoughts on the training aspect and how that can help the implementation of outdoor play and learning.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Exactly that. I'm actually seeing some in chat. I think it's Deborah making. She's also talked about training their HNC childhood practice students in Forest Kindergarten to equip future practitioners. And it seems like a super, super important area. Again, part of that system that either do we feel it has been neglected, and actually we're starting to see much, much more stronger cases for training coming through. Natalie, to yourself first, and then we'll go to Henry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's probably more than one prong approach to this. I think society as a whole needs to engage and embrace being outdoors. I think if we had that shift of mindset where actually, which I think we have seen much more over COVID, when you see how many people are now swimming in natural spaces and how many people have taken up jogging and cycling, we've recognized that, you know, the outdoor space can offer us a huge benefits in terms of other things, just other than just play and learning. But I think so. It definitely needs to happen with that. In terms of what we can do as an educational support, there has to be a recognition that we've actually probably got a generation just now who are college level and people working in early years establishments who actually don't have experience of being in the outdoors that we do in our generation. So, you know, even just knowing what the names of trees are, or weeds, or what a dock leaf can get rid of a nettle sting and things like that, there's a natural literacy that has been lost to a generation. So actually it's a very scary position to put them in, that, you know, now take children outside and be responsible for them if you're not comfortable in that space. So we need to look at actually who they are and address that, as well as the skill set that goes with it. So that whole who is the person, and what are their experiences, and what are their perceptions about things, and what that needs to be unpicked and explored and supported at the same time as giving them the training and the skills. Because as we all know, you know, you can give somebody a lesson to deliver, and they'll deliver it if you want them to deliver it. But if you actually really infuse them and make it the most exciting lesson, they want to share it. And it's that kind of, you know, the quality of output will be massively improved if people believe in it and understand it. So it's giving them all the facts about the health benefits of it, about how it's a better learning experience, how much more engaged and connected the children will be. It's giving them all that information, it's giving them the actual skill set, and it's also addressing that whole, where are you in your personal journey about being in that space and being comfortable with being in an outdoor space. So there's a lot to take on, and I think unfortunately just one thing doesn't give you the best picture. It needs to be that collective, which is why it's so so massively important that these kind of conversations take place, because actually when health professionals are starting to come at it from one angle and education are coming at it from another, and policymakers are joining that all up, that's where you get real positive action happening, because it's a collective, collaborative, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Natalie couldn't add anything to that. I think it's a fantastic answer. Henry, I'm just coming to you actually to see, you know, from your perspective, if you feel there's something there that you'd want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point that you're making, Natalie. We need to take people where they're at currently, and just acknowledge that in Scotland, you know, we're not the most child-friendly country. We're not, despite the rich natural environment, we're not the most outdoor country in the world. I mean, certainly when I visit Scandinavian countries, they're in a very different cultural place. And we need to just take people at face value of where they're at. I mean, certainly speaking personally, it wasn't, I considered myself fairly environmentally friendly and an outdoor type person, but it wasn't until I invested in a decent pair of boots and a decent jacket for Scottish weather that I became much more outdoor than I had, you know, in practice, to meet maybe some of the theory. And it can be scary for some people, you know, going outdoors. Certainly working with some practitioners and children in the past from Southeast Asia, where they come from a culture which is even more averse to outdoors than we are. The experience of actually walking outdoors on an uneven surface was fairly unusual for some children. And that really was quite a culture shock for me, just recognizing that difference. It's of course just fantastic. There is so much training, and you know that it's not all coming from one particular agency, and that now that approach and the recognition that actually children's learning and experiences loads better having a blend of outdoors and indoors, that is going right across all different types of early learning and childcare, but also the early years of primary as well. And we're seeing a significant shift taking place. And I just think that is really good. Also that the standards, the rules, the guidelines are much more reflecting directly children's experiences of outdoor play. So rather than all being the focus on risk aversion and every service has got to have a playground with a certain amount of equipment, talking about actually what children do outdoors. And the health and social care standards, you know, say and put down an expectation that as a child, I experience outdoor play every day, and I get the chance to explore a genuinely natural environment and explore it myself. So to go out to the woods and the mountains and the beaches and all the rest of it.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks. Felicity, I'm actually going to come to you and see if we can touch on something that Henry just mentioned there about how we can bring children's perspectives and understanding within the actual design process of outdoor space, and how you kind of deal with that as part of the design process.
Well, we do a lot of work with children and working with understanding how children read the places that they're in. So I do a lot of work that's retrofit rather than building new buildings. I'm coming into playgrounds that already exist, and there are stories and there's a whole sort of language of mythology about place that children have that you could completely not know about. For example, when we were working on Merrilee, the original school playground, which was demolished and a new school built, looked like a sea of red blaze with a couple of trees around the edge. But the children, each tree had incredible meaning, and different children actually owned different parts of the root systems of the trees and had little miniature territories and would keep things there. So you have to understand that, and that's true whether you're working with adults or children. Actually, we all have these relationships to space. It's a sort of habitat theory that we're just animals, really. But actually, thinking about what Natalie was saying, I think you have to work with young people that are working with children to entice them outside. The children almost don't need the help. We lose a lot of ability as we get older to read and understand landscapes. So Natalie was touching on the fact that a lot of the younger people working within education now are children. They're the first screen generation. They're people who perhaps didn't go outside so much when they were young, and we have to entice them outside. So there's a role of design in creating environments for education that are comfortable for people who are unsure to go out. And I get quite upset by people who say, oh, all you need is a pair of wellies and a good coat, because actually that isn't true for a lot of people. A lot of people need help, and they need comfort, and they need shelter. And a lot of our school environments don't offer that at all. They're very exposed, very poor, and you can improve them. But there is a role for landscape design, very traditional landscape design, and creating spaces that teachers would want to be in, and that are really enticing and delightful for everybody, not just for children, because children will make anything, almost anything, enticing and delightful. They've got it in them. They've got a bit of magic. So that's my answer, is working with everybody to create spaces that work for teachers and children and parents and communities, so that we're getting everybody outside. And like I said, I'm not afraid of using the word beautiful. I think education deserves beautiful spaces, and we've gone a very long way with architecture in education over the last 20 years in Scotland to create really beautiful buildings at times. And it's really fantastic, because really in the last 3 years I've seen a complete sea change in the approach to briefing for new educational buildings. And I'm working, for example, with City of Edinburgh Council on 3 new primary schools where landscape is absolutely at the front of the dialogue, and a lot more money and investment and space is being put into creating really good play environments for schools. So I think it's really happening, and I think it will snowball. I think the early years expansion and the way that the Care Commission very cunningly encouraged investment in outdoor space through how they structured the Space to Grow document is going to have just wonderful spreading influence up into primary, and I hope very much into secondary schools, because they're the worst, actually.
Thanks for that, Felicity. There's so much in all of your answers. I feel as if I'm going, okay, we're not getting much time, and there's so much I want to talk about. Oh my goodness. I'm going to maybe park some of those things I might come back to, because we've got loads of questions. Okay, we're going to change. We're getting a question from Baltic Seat here. There seems to be a theme with Natalie and Felicity about being away from parents and adults. And my question is how that translates into childcare settings. How unobserved in institutions where observing children is really focused on, both for safety and tracking learning, should children be able to be? That's from Hamish. So this idea about, we talk about those unobserved areas, but how does that actually translate into childcare settings? Natalie, to you.
This is where we need to be, again, a very strong voice from policy and a very strong voice from society to say, actually, we need to remove some of the fear factors. I think teachers and educators in early years settings and in primary settings, secondaries, have got a lot of fear about what happens if it's on my watch. You know, what happens if they fall over and hurt themselves? What happens if I lose them? You know, I recently did an orienteering session with primary 7 children in a campus. It's a shared campus, so early primary and secondary. And I was at the back end of what is the secondary school building. And I said to the children, right, okay, from this, you're going to go and actually do a orienteering course now. And I went to set them off and I said, right, on you go, first 3. And they went, are you not coming with us? And literally it was, 200 meters to the front of the building, but they'd never been allowed to the front of the building without walking there with a teacher. And it blew my mind. The whole thing's completely fenced in. It's a completely safe environment. And yet still we have children that they can't go out with certain parameters without being watched. And I think that's not the fault of the teachers. It's not the fault of the thing. It's the fault of society and this fear factor of something might happen and then it'll be my fault, and it's a blame culture. And we really need to loosen that and to start accepting that actually, as we know from a health point of view, if children fall over, that's actually a positive thing, because then their muscles start to learn how to create, to react and support the falling over. If we've actually got, Henry touched on it earlier on about adults that were fearful of stepping on uneven surfaces in Asia. I've experienced that in schools in Scotland, where children don't actually know how to physically walk on uneven surfaces. They're totally nervous and apprehensive of it, because we've got a culture where they're driven to school, they get out into school, they walk along the pavement. All of our school playgrounds are completely safe and danger free. We've actually prevented them, and that's actually really de-skilled them, and it's de-skilled a whole generation of children that don't know how to take risks, don't know how to look after themselves, don't know how to judge where boundaries are safe, or how we're de-skilling them. And we need to kind of tip the scale of society's views on that very dramatically and say, actually, we need to give children the opportunity to take risks. We need to give children the opportunity to judge and make judgments and have consequences. And I quite often, when I go to a group, will say, if they don't want to wear their jackets, don't make them wear their jackets, because actually that's the best learning experience. They'll go outside and we'll feel a wee bit cold, oh my goodness, maybe, and next time 9 times out of 10 they'll take their jacket with them, rather than making this battle of, I'm telling you, you have to wear a jacket, you have to go outside and wear the jacket. And therefore already straight away we've started the whole experience off on a negative footing, because now I've got a really annoyed because I was being made to wear my jacket outside. And I think we need to look for these opportunities and these ways of giving children a chance to make those decisions themselves. I don't know if that quite answered what the question that it was there, but that's kind of part.
Well, I think what the good thing is, we've kind of stumbled ourselves into a few other different areas here as well. So I'm actually going to go to Henry, then I'm going to go to Anne here on the aspects of harm and risk. And one, what the evidence is telling us from research, and also I think from Henry here about, again, how that from a top-down perspective at policy has actually been represented. So I don't know who I want to go to first. Anne, could we go to you first, actually? Because I thought there's a lot of things there Natalie was talking on about harms and risk, and obviously we've done some work on that just now. What's our evidence saying?
Yeah, that's good. It's a really important area, because it's kind of like this perceived thing, like a myth, right? That there are so many risks associated with being outdoors, playing in the woods, but the evidence is not supporting that. So there's no evidence that being outdoors, playing outdoors and in nature is associated with any harmful health consequences. And there might be some studies that show increased risk of tick bites or increased risk of bruising and some injuries, but these are very small studies, and also be in some particular areas. So of course, if you do a study in a forest that is at risk, or that is known to be a tick risk forest, like I can think of areas in Germany, then yes, you find probably children have more tick bites than others. But is that the case in Scotland? So we always need to consider, what is our context and that we are in at the moment in Scotland? What are the forests like? What is the parks like? What is the context that outdoor play and learning is provided? And if I can touch on a thing that Henry said earlier around looking at what Scandinavia did and what we are trying to do here, is the aspect of transferability of something from one context, and for example in Scandinavia to Scotland. So it's really important to see that it's important to understand what system we have here and from which context we are taking something into a new system that might not have the same education, not the same health or social care system in place, and not the same culture in the background. So to really understand where are those fears of harms and injuries are coming from. Is this related to increases in, I don't know, crime rates, or the neighborhood, that there is a risk in, that the neighborhoods are not trusted, and therefore parents don't have these intrinsic fears of something can happen to the child. That might not happen. That might not be the case in other settings, like in Scandinavia, or to a different extent. So I think we're dealing here with a different starting ground, so to say, and so we have to understand what are all the systems and the culture. What is the culture behind, or the lack of culture at being educated in outdoor play and learning, to make it work. In terms of how we can maybe mitigate those negative perceptions on what outdoor play and learning can do to children, is to create positive experiences. So I think one of the comments was relating to weather, and how can we make educators and parents see something, that the positives in a rainy day, the positives in a puddle, the positive in mud, and how much fun and excitement and creativity and curiosity can be generated through playing in the rain and playing with mud, and how many skills in terms of also physical balancing and movement skills can be developed. So just to draw on some of the findings we had when we interviewed parents who are totally convinced that outdoor play and learning is the right thing to do for their children and it benefits them. But what they said is, we would like to know what the children are doing all day long in the woods, because we would like to do this with our children, and they seem to have so much fun, but we don't have the fun. So there's maybe also a lack in creating positive experiences for parents with their children outdoors. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fab, and that's not even touching on some of those things that Natalie was talking about, uneven surfaces. Actually, our reviews really highlighting that as a real positive thing as well, that actually those children who experience uneven surfaces, or those multiple affordances, actually have positive influence in some of their health and wellbeing outcomes. And it draws me to that tweet, and I think everyone probably in this call has seen it, from St Patrick's ELC in Falkirk yesterday, and it was one of the little childs running down a little muddy hill, and at the very bottom decided to do a forward roll straight into a puddle, and it went across all of Twitter yesterday, and it was just showing how actually some of these ELC centres are embracing what is weather in a more positive framing. Henry, to yourself, actually, Sarah will come to you to respond. There's a lot that's already happened since coming to you, so maybe you want to touch on whatever you feel necessary there.
I mean, I think that there is a lot of research out there to draw upon, and all points in similar direction, that the fear of a catastrophic physical accident or infection from outdoor play is a fear that's not backed up by research. And if any of folk on today's meeting haven't read either Sue Palmer or Tim Gill, who are fantastic on perceptions of risk for children and how we've got into position of becoming such a risk-averse society, then I highly recommend that. And often the fears are about a particular isolated incident of a child having, breaking a limb, or maybe ingesting, some fungus. But actually, when you look at the prevalence of these incidents, they just don't actually match up. And what is increasingly around is a lot of research to show that the ill effects of screen time, of diet, of sedentary lifestyles, and a lack of children being able to explore, take risks themselves, is far more dangerous. They might be a bit more longer term. They don't just happen one day. It builds up. But we are sure seeing the evidence of children not being able to explore their environment. And so I would say that there is a lot of research available to draw on. And from the Care Inspectorate's point of view, when we look at the notifications of serious incidents to children that are taking place currently in Scotland in registered services, they are more indoor based and to do with a lot of children in a small space, and actually not what people might fear about children being let loose outside.
And that there could be the key point of the day. Felicity, I actually want to try and touch on some of your expertise here with the related aspect of risk. So, and it kind of, Rachel from Thrive from Aspiring Scotland has also talked about the balance of risk against learning is key, and as discussed, risk is key to learning for children. It aids their ability to self-assess their own situations, and if enabled in the formative years, then does it not create a mindset that can consider situations rather than rushing in headlong? So I suppose my question for you is, how do we build that into some of the design that you do in your work?
We talk a lot in the office about safe danger. So creating situations that feel risky and that feel dangerous, but perhaps are not quite as risky and dangerous as they might appear. So the obvious example is having really a really good mudslide or a really good chute, but making sure that there's no great big rock at the bottom that you're going to smash your head on if you go out of control, whereas a big puddle at the bottom is obviously, as of yesterday's evidence, a really good thing. So safe danger, building in safe danger, so things that feel risky, is quite an easy thing to do. I think that what I'm finding over the last few years is that the Care Commission and the Care Inspectorate has changed their view on things really radically over the last decade. ROSPA, who we get everything ROSPA inspected, that's the accidents people, they have also shifted their view on play very, very significantly. But the clients that we work with within local authorities, so the people that are assessing risk within local authorities, tend to be less aware. So we will fall quite often, even after something's been built and there's been a lot of consultation and dialogue, things will then get changed at the 11th hour when somebody comes out to do a risk assessment and says, oh no, we can't do that. And I'm not quite, I suspect that we're just on a learning curve because things are improving all the time. So I'm fairly optimistic about that.
Yeah, thanks, Felicity. And yeah, I do get the impression that we've kind of moved away from this kind of risk assessment type of approach to more of a risk benefit type of approach, where it's a slightly different thinking and it's actually a more positive framing as well. So I'm going to try and see if I can move on because we've got loads and loads of questions. One question I actually want to talk on, it's actually something that's kind of close to my thinking in terms of our lack of research, certainly, is this idea of movement from early years preschool into primary and secondary. And the question is, we've heard a lot about investment in and now practice in early years, some in primary. What similar investment, support and research are the panel aware of for older primary pupils, right up to the adolescent play and outdoor learning in secondary school? And I find that as an important question because I feel as if we are very progressive, we're very forward thinking, and the ELC kind of sector is really kind of going at promoting outdoors. Do we see a disconnect getting into primary school? Is that changing? How does that actually mean for the kind of wider system? Do we see attenuation potentially of some of those effects, health effects we're seeing in ELC getting into primary school? From my perspective, I don't think the research exists at all to work that through and understand a bit more. But I certainly would love to hear from Henry, from Natalie, to see actually what that means for policy and that means for practice as we move from preschool into primary and beyond in secondary. Natalie, to yourself first.
Probably risk getting my wrists slapped here, but I would agree. There's a massive disparity between what years settings get in terms of funding, support, etc. For outdoor learning and what primary, secondary sector get. I felt a wee moment of glee earlier this year because the Scottish Government did grant an award to develop an online training package for teachers, so the Teaching Learning Outdoors, and it was developed by SAPO, a 2-hour online e-module course, and also a supporting learning outdoors, which was done for all third sector and people working in and covered practitioners as well. And SAPO were funded that. It was less than 20,000 in comparison to the, and I have to say it's probably gone up into hundreds of thousands of pounds that have been spent on training, supporting, getting outdoor learning happening in early years. And there's a very big comparison there that's glaringly obvious. Support for teachers to teach outdoors doesn't take place in ITs, and it does, but it's in an ad hoc as a person feels inclined to deliver that on their IT training, initial teacher training education programs. So some universities do it, some don't. There's no requirement for that to happen. Whereas now we're looking at, early years HNDs, HNCs are very much embedding, the outdoor learning in practice in that training and provision. So there's a real disparity between what's on offer. As we move into secondary schools, the requirements for what education is, particularly post BGE, when we're looking at qualifications, it suddenly rockets into what it's about is about attainment of literacy, numeracy, and the subjects for those courseworks. So again, we throw the outdoor learning to one side unless we can tag it onto something and say this is a really positive experience that improves attainment of those qualifications. So where we are seeing outdoor learning taking place, it's field studies within geography and social studies, social subjects. Some science courses now are very much engaging in that, and that's certainly where we're finding the inroad. PE departments, and where you can kind of channel yourself into saying, look, if you did this, deliver this outside, it would be so much better. But really, because the focus, and it still does tend to be from government about getting the qualifications, as soon as you start to head up further up the school, it's about attainment and that. And as you say, there's very little research on specifics of attainment in literacy and numeracy or any of our core curriculum subjects through or using the context of outdoor learning. My own project, the Curriculum Outdoors Attainment Challenge, we do a pre and post on literacy and numeracy at P1, P4 and P7. And all of our data shows that there's a massive improvement, particularly with regards to retention and children understanding, having a deep understanding of something when they've learnt it in a real life context, and then carrying it on further up the years. And we're in our 5th year now, and teachers will still say to me, the kids still say, look at those right angles over there, because they've actually learnt it in an environment where it was meaningful, and as opposed to just copying them out of a jotter in a maths classroom. And I think we need to start looking at the cognitive benefits of teaching it in a real context, and applying it in that context creates greater, deeper understanding and learning for the young people, and actually show that can be really valuable in a secondary context. And I think as we saw that, if we could get the research that shows that, because we're seeing it anecdotally, and we're seeing it time and time again anecdotally, and have been doing for decades, but there's still always this drive to prove it on the bit of paper, and we don't tend to do bits of paper, and when we're out there doing it, we're just doing it and living it. But we need to start getting that data to prove that it can be far greater learning experience and positive experience.
Thanks, Natalie. Henry, is evidence the key to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some evidence of the benefits, particularly for boys. Some evidence of benefit of actually just being outside regularly in terms of the quality of the indoor learning and that ability to let off steam as part of the school day. I think there is quite a bit of research on that. But I just wanted to build on Natalie's point there in terms of that lived experience of the environment and that learning which is embedded in reality and is not too divorced in terms of it being academic paper learning. In that, I don't know about others listening to this, but certainly my own experience are absolutely the things that stick are where there was some engagement with the real world and there was a genuine lived experience. And there's a lot more teaching about the environment. There's a lot more interest about the environment. But if that is separate from children's lived experience, then it's not going to have the same impact. And at the end of the day, what we need for children to really engage with the outdoor environment and to get the most benefit from that is for them to get immersion early on, and that continues throughout school. It's worrying to hear about, the pressures on the outdoor centres. I know that is a common experience for children, that they learn a lot from going on trips. And why is that? And I think that we really want to learn from that and to help children actually regain lived knowledge of the environment. And hey, if we are going to protect the environment going forward, we will need the next generation to have that.
Thank you very much, Henry. I suppose to Anne, from our own perspective, evidence generation from research, what is missing just now, from that long-term kind of work from early years through to secondary? What's missing? What is it that we can do to help support some of that evidence generation?
Yeah. So yeah, one thing is to start looking into longer term impact. And of course, ideally, in the ideal world, we would start collecting data of children that are in early years now and follow them up over time to see if that can have, if any exposure in the early years has a sustained impact. But of course, ideally, we want the children in primary and secondary school to be exposed to outdoor play and learning as well. But what we need to understand is that how it's kind of the dose. So is it enough to do once a term, some lecture on something, or does it need to be more frequent? Does it need to be more repeated, and over what duration? An hour, a week? So what? So kind of there's very little evidence on the residentials and wider outcomes. So yeah, as Natalie said, so generating evidence in that aspect, but also we can use, and because of course research takes time to collect all the data, we won't have the answers tomorrow about the generation of children that are now in nursery, right? But there are new methods out there, and we can use simulation, computerized simulation models to kind of simulate changes in scenarios, or in test our understanding of certain pathways, so we can take all the data and all the knowledge we have now, put them into a computer model. And we in our department, we have colleagues that very much are experts in the field of generating these simulations, and those simulations can speed up, kind of fast forward time. So what we would need, where we would need to wait 30 years to see, or maybe 15 years to see changes, they can see it in a week in their models. And so that could help to answer some questions around, is there an impact? Is there an evidence that then can help informing policies and maybe convincing support in primary and more secondary school. And what we also could do is to link data sets. So we have cohort data available on, for example, growing up in Scotland. But if we link those data that we have with education data, or with health, care inspectorate data on what the school environment looks like, and what the practice is, what child staff ratio is. So kind of those data linkage projects can also help us answering questions that we want the answers for kind of now, and where we don't have the time to wait a couple of years until new data are coming in.
Yeah, thanks. And basically what we've just said there is that our work, we play computer games, we play Sims. That's what we do. We play Sims and just see what happens. But in general, actually, it's a really, really great method to use. And some great experts in our unit who can use it effectively to tweak and change your environment. So part of this modelling is allow us to actually say, well, what if we change that? And what if we do that to the environment? What if we add in that there? Or we add in outdoor nurseries here, here, and here? How can that actually change health and well-being in short term and long term? And Anne touched on some of those really great points about dose as well. It's some of these things that, and for me, it's opportunity. What we're talking about here today is lots of opportunities going forward, and that's what I hope we take from this, is that there's so much still to be done and to learn from. Now we're already ran over, which is, well, that was going to happen, I think. I'm just wondering if everyone here, there's still a few questions, if the panelists are okay to hang off for another 10 minutes, or do we need to get going? If you're okay for 10 minutes, I was just going to ask a few more questions. I fully appreciate and understand some of those that are attending today might not be able to hang on, and feel free, yeah, just to leave. It's been great to have you. But there are so many questions here that I thought if we can keep going, we will. So I think one of the questions that are coming up, and it's coming across, I come back to this idea of training, and actually mandatory training for early years teaching staff. You know, is where we offer this Fondest kindergarten course as an added extra. Should it be mandatory? Natalie?
I have a bit of an issue with making things mandatory. It's a double-edged sword. And we've had teachers say, "Oh, but I can't go into the woods because I'm not a Forest Schools leader." And that just horrifies me. I can't go into the woods. What, you know, what's that all about? And that's not one-offs. That's a commonplace, and it's a myth. You know, I can't light fires because I haven't had the training. So when we make things and we put training there and we make it mandatory, it then starts to put a level on it that people think I can't do that. And actually, it's about making it, yes, you can. You know, particularly teachers. Yes, you can learn how to do it, you know, and attend training, that's fine. But if we put that mandatory part on it, it becomes a bit of an issue. But equally, if it's not mandatory, then it's really easy to let it fall by the wayside and not become important. So I think I don't know how we balance it, but I think it needs to be a very well-managed, balanced approach to that. And I think we need to make sure that we're engaging with everybody, that's all the stakeholders that are involved in that. So, you know, putting out, okay, all of our early years providers are going to suddenly be Forest Schools leaders. That concerns me, because as a local authority, we haven't got the funding to be able to pay for everybody to go through Forest Schools. But also, actually, as well, it's about then de-skilling all the other people that are doing fantastic work outdoors at the moment, and we're suddenly saying that's not valuable and it's not good quality. And so yeah, there's a lot of discussion around it. Personally, I'm not fussed about it being mandatory. I am fussed that it's given prominence, and we big up those benefits. To me, it's a publicity exercise, a lot of the stuff that we've got issues with, and it's about, you know, what Anne was speaking about earlier on about those risks and giving it a positive spin. The rain comes down, but actually there's really positives when it rains, and these are the positives. And it's about that really clear messaging about what we expect, what our expectations are for our early years services, and our school and our primary and our secondary. And you know, I'm more along the lines of, you know, the coalition statement that Play Scotland put out, you know, those statements about our young people will have, you know, it's a putting it out there kind of manifesto approach. I think actually probably a better way to go, you know, that actually all of our young people in our authority, or all the young people in our establishment will have these experiences, or will engage in these opportunities. And then linking that into making sure that the staff have just got that access to professional learning, and rather than it being this you must do, actually, look, this is what we would do to provide this kind of positive experience. And I think that's my personal take on it. But, you know, that's, yeah, open again. Doesn't give any clear-cut answers, unfortunately. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. I think you mentioned there, certainly something that Anne and myself were involved in was the Scotland's Coalition for Outdoor Play and Learning position statement by Inspiring Scotland. So if there's anyone who hasn't read that, I'm sure Avril, I think we're trying to create a resource list, and I think that will definitely be on it as well. Henry, do you want to add anything to what Natalie said there?
Yeah, I would agree. It could really backfire. There's an awful lot of rules and mandatory stuff coming in for early learning in childcare. And, you know, if it was made a standard that, you know, everybody has to fulfill a certain training course, it could, you know, have unintended consequences. You could have the first people going on the course are seen as, oh, all the outdoor play is vested in this one practitioner. and everyone else can continue kind of folding their arms and not engaging with it. And as Natalie says, you know, it's about that empowerment, that ownership from all staff, that you don't have to have a passport to do outdoor play. You can get on and do it. And I would say that it's more a question of embedding the outdoor play principles and practice within all those early learning and childcare and indeed teaching qualifications, that it just should be part of the curriculum and part of what we learn. And I think at the moment, it's still being seen as a wee bit of an add-on.
Yeah.
And we need to move to really mainstream it. So rather than it being seen as owned by specialist agencies, whether or not they're providers, whether or not Forestry Commission, organisations like Inspiring Scotland, what we're trying to do is to really embed it in just your local nursery, your local school, and it should just be part and parcel of the day's activity.
Yeah, that definitely seems like certainly the opportunity and direction of travel that we're going in. It would be a case of how does that practically be, how's that implemented as well, that becomes really, really key. And that touches on some of the work that we're doing in terms of implementation as well. And I think that's coming out. Felicity, I've got a couple of questions here, again, about design. So I'd love to see if I could pose them to you whilst we can. There's two questions, but I think I'll try and kind of merge them into one for you. One followed on from the earlier Baltic Street question. So their site is co-developed by children and does have mud as pallets and tyres, which the children love. So is there scope for more loose parts to enable children in early years and in primary to develop skills that's through this less refined medium? And the second question is, are any secondary schools looking at redesigning their playgrounds, as some primary schools are doing? Would they look different to primary playgrounds from secondary? So sorry, there's kind of two questions there, but I thought I'd bring them together for you.
Okay, I'm not a great advocate of tyres and pallets in schools, and I think places like Baltic Street are wonderful, but school environments are slightly different. I think loose parts is utterly fundamentally important, and if we go right back to the beginning of the conversation and we were talking about empowerment and territory and special places and being able to make your own places and be in control of your environment is fundamental to that experience. So loose parts are really important. If you build playgrounds, if when you're making and designing playgrounds for schools, you incorporate a naturalistic environment with woodland and rocks and sand, and it naturally is a loose parts environment. It just is. And you can add to that with whatever you want. I mean, I think loose parts is an easy win in any playground. What those loose parts are is probably, I mean, it could be any things, and it could be tyres and pallets if that's really what you want to do. But again, going back to the discussion about children walking over uneven surfaces, it's probably more interesting if the loose parts are natural and are sticks and branches and logs and rocks and stuff, because or a combination anyway, because those things are uneven by their nature, more challenging and more sensory. So I just think the answer is to get as much access to green space as possible and to build that into playgrounds. So when you're briefing for new schools, you brief for natural play, for soft environments, for less tarmac, for more trees, for more shrubs, and the loose parts just is naturally, that's what those environments create. And then and then you can bring whatever you want into them. In terms of secondary schools, it's not that different, is it? It's a sliding scale, and I use the same principle that if you can create really good green spaces as part of a school campus, they can get used for learning in, they can get used for playing in, they can be used for quiet time, for breakout, for mental health stuff, for exertion and exercise. So I think it's fundamentally about designing out the traditional Scottish playground, which is tarmac, and bringing in much more varied combination of environments, which include a significant amount of green and trees.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Felicity. I think that kind of also kind of follows on from a lot of the research we've been doing in terms of the evidence base suggesting that multiple affordances, environments that provide multiple things rather than just single affordances, are often better for children's health and wellbeing outcomes. So we're actually closing in now to 2 o'clock. I actually wanted to ask one question. And I'm trying to look at 2 questions I want to ask. I'm trying to work out what's the best one because I've not got a lot of time. But okay, so we're doing a lot of great work in Scotland across policy, across research, across practice and design. What do you think is our most important next steps? And I'm going to ask you to be very, very brief, to put you on the spot and actually think of something. It might be within your own kind of field, but very briefly tell me, what do you think is our most important next steps? Natalie? You're on mute, sorry. Is that you're doing that on purpose? I don't want to answer, I'm not going to answer that.
The $50 million question, my goodness.
Yes.
What do we need to do? I think it's actually it's everybody's duty as a collective society. We need to change our attitude to being outside. Once we start doing that, then actually learning outside will be an obvious thing to do. We also need to start being much clearer about what we're doing when we're outside. I have a wee personal rant at teachers all the time because they say, oh, it was brilliant fun, we went outside and we got really muddy. And that's being posted as a P7 tweet. That just compounds the fact that actually when you go outside, you're not doing anything except having fun. And we really need to be so clear about the messaging as to why we're out there. We were physically active. The children got so much more benefit in terms of their engagement in the connections to nature. Their physical activity was better off. Their health and mental health and well-being was better because they were in a green space. And we learned how to do right angles, or we learned how to do measurement, or we learned how to do, understanding where the science of a particular thing. We need to be much clearer about how we're labeling those experiences outside, and that's if we're presenting it to our head teachers or whether we're presenting it to our parents or whatever. So but generally I would say what we could do is everybody just start using the outdoors and being positive about when we're in the outdoors. And policy, make policy talk to each other. We've got these great health policies, we've got great education policies, and the two don't seem to be have talked. We're doing it much better now. Actually, since COVID, I would say so many barriers have shut down in terms of the siloed approach that we had to so many things. That seems to have stopped, and we do seem to be talking much closer. I mean, we've got things within local authority where we're talking to transport now, we're talking to catering now that just wouldn't have happened pre-COVID, which is fantastic, because actually we're all singing from the same song sheet now, which is a much more positive place to be. So I think we could all just be much more collaborative in our approaches to engaging in the outdoor spaces, but actually just share our positive experiences from the outside.
Great, Natalie, thanks so much. I think that's fantastic. Anne, to you, what do you think? Next important steps for us, research, what are we doing?
I have two. One is relating to what Natalie actually said, is this kind of joint up working of sectors, and not just, so because there are conflicting interests in the different sectors, from urban planning to health to education, and bringing all these people in one room and working through what are the conflicting interests. And all of us, I believe there is a common ground that everyone has, but we need to understand everyone's juggling loads of agendas. So, and how these agendas are all connected, and where is the common ground, that is important to figure out, because then we can pull the agenda in one direction. The other point I had is also we should reach out to other disciplines that have a healthy child development in their interest. So what about family doctors, pediatricians, midwives, child protection? So how much do they know about the benefits of outdoor play and learning, and can they actually contribute to the system of promoting outdoor play and learning? So make the support material. We have so much amazing material, Play Scotland, Inspiring Scotland, out there to support outdoor play and learning. Do they know about it? I don't know. So that's where I like to see next move.
Thank you very much, Anne. Henry, to you.
In some ways, we're just really performing very well as a country when it comes to policy, when it comes to research. And often I'm faced with some realization or maybe embarrassment, taking some international visitors who have read a lot about Scottish policy, and that, you know, is not just applicable to outdoor play. And then they come and visit services, and there is a jaw-dropping moment when they realize that the actual provision doesn't always match the aspiration. And I think that we have got a huge opportunity here with COVID. Some of that traditional silo working and barriers between agencies has dissolved. And of course, outdoor play is recognized that it's very low risk compared to very busy small classrooms. And I just think that we're presented with a huge opportunity to reach out to others within education, within housing, within transport, and to become much more joined up and to kind of walk the talk a bit more.
Thank you so much, Henry. I feel as if there's a real good theme coming through this one. To Felicity, for your final thoughts there on what that question we posed.
Well, Henry just stole my final thoughts. I think that we need to seize the day. I think this opportunity is a window in time where immense changes happened really quickly, and we've proved that we can do things that had seemed like they were dragging for decades. So it's about trying to maintain enthusiasm and energy through what is quite a hard time for people, but use this as an opportunity for really good things to come. And, you know, COVID is a bad thing, but a lot of good things could come from it.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Felicity. Yeah, I am hearing a lot about this idea that we're already maybe on a cultural shift. We're already potentially changing, thinking back to our own childhoods. Maybe that's already happening, and all this good work is actually part of that. I'm also keen to remind everyone that there are so many resources that have been discussed today. Some may be familiar, some not. What we're going to do is try and create a big list of resource to send out to everyone who's attended, covering everything from Inspiring Scotland, Play Scotland, Upstart Scotland. Sue Palmer's book, Plays the Way, is just out as well. It's a fantastic resource. Some of Tim Gill's stuff as well. We'll get that all sent out. At this point, I think I'm already seeing in the chat function, we should be trying to do another one. Let's try and get this organised again. Let's focus on something slightly different, just to show you how much it is in this area. And I think we maybe should. So please, if you have got ideas and you're interested, then please get in touch with us. We'd love to be working together with everyone that's on this call. And I think that leads on to what my final point is that maybe something that's practical that we can do right now is that if you are working in any projects going forward, reach out, ensure that you have representation across sectors, across agencies, to bring that different perspective, bring that different experience and expertise to the work that you're doing. It's something certainly in research that we are really, really keen to do. If there's an opportunity for it, then please let's do it. I suppose at this point in time, I can only sit here and thank the panelists for dedicating the last couple of hours to discussing what has been an amazing topic. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I certainly have enjoyed listening. Appreciate it. Thank you so, so much. To everyone in attendance, thank you for joining us. It's been great to have so many numbers coming in and listening, and the chat function looks like it's been great as well. So what's left to say? Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we'll see you again sometime, hopefully.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.